Okay, welcome to this class. Today we are going to complete lesson number 1. We would have completed it in the previous lecture, but there are just a couple of slides left, and they are about the last topic in this lesson, which is project compliance. Although this lesson, which is about business acumen, was really very important, and naturally, whatever time we have spent on this lecture, on this lesson, was really important because that was all conceptual. We talked about the strategy, we talked about the alignment of business value, and a lot many things. The concepts like program, portfolio, OPM, and lot many interesting and very conceptual ideas we have basically discussed here, and they are going to be a very good base for you to understand the further uh, content of this training. So this is the last topic, project compliance, and let me tell you what this compliance means. From the point of view of predictive as well as agile, whatever kind of project you are dealing with, it must comply with certain criteria, certain rules, certain regulations, and certain standards. And that is decided by the organization in which you are serving, in which you are working, who owns the project. And they may apply certain rules and regulations which must be complied in addition to the project or customer requirements. For example, your organization is a ISO certified organization. They have got a quality policy for the whole organization, and this project you are doing for a customer, although all the customer requirements are to be fulfilled, but in addition to that, you also have to upkeep your image as a quality organization, and whatever is the quality policy of the organization, whatever are the requirements of ISO certification, the projects must comply with that. Again, if there is some environmental policy, especially in the construction projects and the health projects, we have got to take care of the environmental policy, which applies to your maybe region or country, and whether it is part of the project requirement or not, you have to ensure, you have to assure the environment is not disturbed by that. There is no pollution to the environment in any way. That is again another kind of compliance. And similarly, we could, if we are again dealing with a construction project, in addition to all the requirements, there are safety and security needs which are to be complied with. So there could be as many types of compliances which could apply to your project, and they are always in addition to the customer needs and requirements. Therefore, until and unless all those compliance requirements are accomplished, the product of the project is not considered to be clear or can be handed over to the customer. Our project cannot be closed down until all the compliance requirements are accomplished. I hope you understand the idea which I am trying to convey to you. Kelvin, can you relate to that?
Yes, 100%.
Okay, good. And what about you, Alexandra?
Yes, absolutely.
Right. As far as the predictive projects are concerned, when they collect the requirements from the customer, those requirements are generally considered to be kind of against each requirement you agree on an acceptance criteria. Have you heard about this term, acceptance criteria?
Yep.
So acceptance criteria is generally considered to be associated with the requirement. When the customer asks you to build something, they give you an acceptance criteria that, okay, we will accept this deliverable if these conditions are met. But this is classically related to the deliverable, right? So acceptance criteria in predictive projects is generally considered to also add further requirements which are related to the compliance. So when we use the word acceptance criteria in a predictive project, we assume that that includes all the required compliance requirements as well. And until all those compliance requirements are fulfilled, the product cannot be considered complete. That is, as far as the predictive projects are concerned. But in agile or adaptive projects, the things are slightly different. That is, because we are not going to be delivering the product at the end of the project, and we are going to be doing the continuous delivery after every iteration. It could be a part of a product, it could be a sample of a product, it could be a demonstration. Whatever we are delivering, there is always an acceptance criteria associated with every user story, and every requirement we fulfill, we have to fulfill certain acceptance criteria, and this acceptance criteria is only relevant to the requirement or the need. As such, there is no compliance which is actually attached to that. The reason is we may not be handing over certain completed product to the customer at that point in time, but we may only be showing them getting their approvals. So here, acceptance criteria would mean only those conditions which the customer has agreed as per the requirement of that specific user story. That does not include the compliance thing. But when it is time to deliver something to the customer, that normally happens in agile when there is a time to release the product to the customer. And you might remember that in agile we have a concept of release planning, which could be tied to the contract with the customer. That customer wants certain items to be delivered to them at specific times according to the contract. Generally, those points in time when those deliveries are to be made to the customer are called release points. So we plan and we create an outline plan for releases, and we deliver all the deliverables which have so far been prepared, though they may have been agreed and accepted by the customer, but they have yet not been handed over, and they will be handed over at the time of the release. So that is the point when all the compliance requirements regarding an adaptive project has to be completed, and completing the compliance requirements, the word which is used, the term which is used, in addition to the acceptance criteria, which has already been agreed by the customer now, is the definition of done. When we are physically handing over anything to the customer in an agile project, in addition to the acceptance criteria, we have to complete the definition of done, which relates to all the compliances, all the relevant compliances. That means we do have two terms here. One is the acceptance criteria in agile, and the other is the definition of done. Now, I do understand that it might even be possible that you may be physically handing over certain deliverables even after an iteration. If something is to be handed over to the customer before the release point, that deliverable will also go through a definition of done. Otherwise, it cannot be handed over. So the condition is when you hand over anything, partial or complete product at any point to the customer in an agile project, it should not only comply with the acceptance criteria, but also with the definition of done. I hope you get the idea. Kelvin?
that's something that I never experienced, so because I haven't been part of any
It,
project managed under the agile
exactly.
methodology. So yeah, but I
So
understand the concept. Yeah.
exactly. So basically, what you might have experienced is a predictive project in
Yeah,
which the
yeah.
compliance,
Almost all the projects have been
yeah,
predictive,
exactly,
and yeah, a little bit in yeah. They try to implement the agile in one
exactly.
project that I used to
So
work, but in one process, let's say.
exactly.
And yeah, at the end, it wasn't properly implemented, and yeah,
So by
okay.
default, in a predictive project, it is assumed that acceptance criteria means the compliance is inclusive into that acceptance criteria. Moreover, you may not be delivering very frequently, you would be delivering mostly at the end of the project, but partially maybe at the end of a phase. So at the end
Yeah,
of a phase,
yeah. There are two type of deliverables that we produce. So, for example, on the design phase, yeah, we need to
mhm,
produce a lot of
exactly,
drawings, documents, or
right.
and then at the yeah during the testing and commissioning phase, we need
Mhm,
to provide some deliverables, which are test reports, and all these combined, it's going to be produced like the quality packs or the end of the quality assurance for the
exactly.
handover. So yeah.
Yeah. So what all types of compliances could be there, they are shown here. There could be some internal or external standards, like, external, like we talked about the enterprise environmental factors, external enterprise environmental factors. There could be certain government regulations you have to follow that has to be complied with. There are some internal environmental factors like corporate policies, they have to be complied with. There could be some product or project related quality policy or requirements which have to be complied. Or if you are very sensitive to project risk and you are following the risk management in a very thorough manner, especially in construction or similar kind of project, then probably we could have a policy for risk, and that has also to be complied with. PMO, generally, if it exists in your organization, that generally takes on the charge to monitor all kinds of compliances at organizational level. But naturally, if there is an environmental compliance, although the PMO will ensure, but other bodies may get involved. Maybe an environmental body will have to certify that this project, the product of this project, is compliant with the environmental requirements. But generally, if PMO is existing in your organization, that would take care of all types of governance, all types of compliances. Project team is also responsible for project activity related compliances. That is, that those compliances which happen within the project, which could be associated directly with the requirement or requirements of the customer or requirements of the project. So they could be within the project, there could be quality within the processes of the project and deliverable. But you see, there are two different concepts. One is the quality at the organizational level, and the other is the quality at the project level. Quality at the project level may have uh, different requirements, or maybe it may be more stringent than the organizational policy. So, whatever quality the customer requires, if it is part of the requirements of the customer, we are definitely supposed to comply with that. But at the same time, we have to ensure that our organizational quality policy regarding products and projects are also being followed, right? So here, when I talk about the project team, what kind of quality they are complying specifically, that is relevant to the requirements of the customer. So quality of the processes of the project management and of the deliverable and the product, that is from explicit point of view of the project. Then is the procurement and work by vendors. In case your project involves some kind of procurement activity for equipment, for raw materials, for any other thing, or even for services, that should also comply with certain procurement policy of the organization. Anyways, so on the right hand side, you can see various kinds of compliances. There could be certain policies, laws, standards, regulations, rules, requirements, governances, and transparency requirements. They all could be considered as various types of compliances. So, compliance requirements. They could be legal or they could be regulatory. They could be constraints on you from externally from the outside environment, that these are the legal requirements you have to fulfill, or these are the regulations. So you have to comply with them. There is there are no two ways about it. So requirements for specific practices, maybe you are doing some practices and they have to comply with certain standards. If your organization has agreed to that, so that has to be done. Standards have to be met. Privacy laws you have to follow. Handling of sensitive information. These could be some of the examples regarding the legal and regulatory constraints. As far as the quality is concerned, I have already discussed with you in two different perspectives. One is the organizational quality policy, and the other is the quality managed at the product level, which may be a little more or less than what the organization asked for. You have to fulfill both these levels, at the project level as well as at the organization level. You have to tailor your quality requirements according to the need of your project. Maybe your quality level is, say, 8 out of 10 as required by the organization, but your customer wants the quality of level 9, then probably you have to comply with level 9, but at the same time, you have to ensure that organizational level 8 is anyways achieved, right? And it could be vice versa. Maybe the organizational policy is to meet level 9, whereas customer needs just level 5. So you comply with the customer requirement, but at the same time, from the organizational side, you have to come up to the level of level 9. Do you agree with me? So these are various kinds of compliance requirements. How do you classify these compliances in various categories? The classification, naturally, I can leave it to you. You can decide what kinds of compliances apply on your project, but there could be certain compliances relevant to the environmental risks. There could be certain compliances which could be categorized under workplace health and safety, as I just gave an example. Mostly in the construction project and health projects, we may have to comply with these kind of workplace health and safety requirements. Can you give me an example of a workplace health and safety requirement from medical point of view? Take the example of COVID. What were the compliance requirements at that point in time? Whatever projects were going on during the time in COVID, in the medical industry, whatever projects were being handed over, were being undertaken. Can you point out some of the health and safety requirements relevant to that? Alexandra?
Is this talking about like the development of vaccines or like in a medical workplace, like in a hospital?
And there could be any project. It could be treatment of patients. It could be creating of vaccine. So whatever you were doing, you had to be careful about certain things. So what could be
Yes.
those? Can you indicate those compliances? Some of them.
So for instance, PPE, so wearing personal protective equipment might be one of those
Of course.
requirements.
Very good.
Um, and then I'm sure there's like different like in like standards like of like for instance like pa patient treatment of certain compliance. Like, and I don't know enough about the medical
Okay, just
industry, but yeah.
it's good enough. It's good enough. They could be even, because there is a lot of work and people have to work overtime and 24 hours a day, then people cannot do that. So you may say that, okay, overtime is allowed, but not more than a person should not work more than 12 hours a day, right? There should be replacement available for that, something like that, because that is also associated with the health of the worker, right? From the
Drug and
construction.
alcohol. The drug and alcohol.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Okay, Kelvin, from the construction point of view, can you come up with certain compliances regarding health and safety?
The PPE is one of them. Health and safety, we also have the drug and alcohol is something that we have. The fatigue is another one. We also have from the health and safety, for example, working in the energized environment. So where we have live equipment, we need to go through a certain process like work permitting or log out, tag out. These are the kind of regulations that are applied for this one.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, in case of for example, construction, when we are working on a network environment, so networking,
Hmm.
we need to comply with some regulation like, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So some of the things most of the things you said were relevant to health and safety, but naturally you gave us some more of those compliances as well. Anyways, let us focus on ethical and non-corrupt practices. Can you come up with an example of that?
So that like in it, for instance, if like a government worker, sometimes they can't receive gifts of more than like $50 USD, for instance. And so
Okay,
that would be an example of that.
good.
It's also
So,
applicable for some of non-governance or non-political,
mhm,
organizations.
okay,
Yeah, for example, yeah, in my case, yeah, because I
exactly.
work with some subcontractors, I'm not allowed to receive gift, invitation, dinner, some kind of things from, yeah.
Exactly. That is the point. That is the point. But now you understand what are these compliances, and these compliances are in addition to the requirements of the product, right? They all have to be complied with in the environment you are doing your project work. You should also comply with a lot many other things, and they are also enforceable, like social responsibility, quality, process risk, and things like that. Categories vary based on industry and solution. Naturally, in your construction industry, that might be different categories you could come up with. In a medical profession, it could be different. In IT, they could be different. So I can't really give you some specific categories for these compliances, but you have to come up with your own environment and see which compliances apply to you. They also may be unique legal and regulatory requirements which could be applied on all kinds of projects, like proprietary rights and things and legal things which are applicable to all kinds of environment and conditions. Anyways, this is how you can categorize your compliances in your own way, and then you can follow that. Now, compliance, there is always a risk, negative risk associated with it. There is always a threat that you would not be able to comply with what you are getting into, right? If you are working on a COVID project, you might catch COVID all by yourself. Yeah, that could be a threat. So there is always a risk of non-compliance of any of the categories. How to investigate that? For that, these are some of the questions you may ask yourself. For example, where public who in the organization handles compliance? Now, this is a very interesting question. Do you can you relate to this? Who in your organization is actually overall responsible for compliance? Is it some department or a person in the organization which looks after all the compliances? Or maybe project has its own compliance mechanism built within the project. So what about that, Calvin?
We all are, for example, based on the nature of our responsibilities, we all need to comply with this.
Yeah, but what is the mechanism in your organization? Do you have a compliance officer or a compliance department, or your project organizes its own compliance mechanism?
It is distributed based on the regulation that we need to comply with. So, for example, if we talk about health and safety regulations, so there is a health and safety officer, inspector, or manager
Exactly.
from the health and safety team. If it's something about yeah, for example, the drug and alcohol is
Mm-hmm.
something that is, in this case, is managed or regulated, in this case, by the HR team, the
Mm-hmm.
human resources team.
Exactly.
If we're talking about site compliance with the, for example, with the working on a energized environment, so you have the work permit officers
Mm-hmm.
that are somehow implementing those rules on site. And yeah, so yeah, it's distributed everywhere.
Exactly. It is distributed, and various departments of the organization might be handling various compliances. But if there is a very strict environment, there could be even one central office which could look after all the compliance, like if you have a PMO. PMO can coordinate with all the projects undergoing right now, and that can have inspections and all conducted for all kinds of compliances. But at the same time, we also said that if there is an environmental group which is going to give you a go ahead for every environmental compliance, then probably you need to get in touch with them. What legal and regulatory requirements impact the organization? So you have to understand, we have to be little broad-minded about it, and we have to understand that what are the legal and regulatory requirements in your specific case, in your specific industry, or the project you are handling. What are the legal and regulatory framework which are imposing certain compliances on you? Maybe just as we discussed, what there could be requirements for workplace safety, maybe for data protection. Alexandra can relate to that. Requirements for professional memberships, and so on and so forth. Maybe your organization does not employ people who are not project management professionals on the projects, right? So that could be a requirement for professional membership or certification. Then what is the organization's quality policy? Because normally quality policy is a big thing, and everything you do in your organization, and naturally the projects are part of the organization, the quality policy squarely applies to all the environment of the project. So you can't be out of it, you have to comply with it. Last question is, are the team and stakeholders aware of compliance matters? This is very important. Even if there are, regulatory requirements, compliance requirements, other compliance requirements, environmental compliance requirements, it is the duty of the project manager to make his or her team and all the relevant stakeholders aware about those compliance requirements, as if they understand that we don't just have to hand over the deliverable according to the acceptance criteria, but we have to ensure before handing it over to the customer that these compliance requirements are met. I hope you can relate to that as well. Treat compliance as a project objective, because no matter what kind of project you are doing, if you do not fulfill any one of the compliance requirements, your project will never be considered accomplished. Never. So make it a project, one of the project objectives, to complete all the relevant compliance requirements. So if that is the case, and you have made it so serious for your project, then you can proactively track and manage risks for compliance requirement, meaning although you are looking after the risks within the project about the activities or the work of the project, but now you will also look for specific risks which could cause non-compliance in your project, not from the product point of view, but from the point of view of the compliance requirements alone, right? If you do not comply with the safety requirements, what are the risks? People will get injured. Maybe you have to pay for the hospitalization cost and all. So these are the kind of risks you also must consider in addition to the normal project risks. Be prepared to perform quality audits. Actually, these audits and these inspections are to be carried out maybe internally within the project, or maybe external auditors might be coming for the purposes of quality, for the purposes of environment, or any other kind of compliance. There could be inside and outside internal as well as external auditors who may be welcomed into the project. Continuously validate legal and regulatory compliance for delivery. Check compliance before the end of the project to avoid transferring issues. Because if you leave out one of the compliances and you hand over the project, although the project is completing all the customer requirement, but naturally, if there is an environmental problem you did not resolve, that is going to surface as an issue for the customer, naturally. So that is more so the reason that you should comply with all these requirements. So in a risk or dedicated compliance register, in a project, we usually have a risk register. But compliance is such an important subject that all the risks to be compliance may be part of your risk register, but as you could also form a separate compliance register, that is the risk to the compliance. So those risks which are relevant to the compliance of the requirements, they may be separately drawn, they may be separately looked after, and as we deal with normal risk, we will pay special attention to the risks to compliance. We will identify those specific risks. We will assign that risk owners to each one of those risks. We will see the impact of our realized risk. We will create the risk responses. Although we do all that in project risk as well, but just giving it a little bit more importance, the compliance is also either to be considered as part of the project risk, or if you want to even give it more emphasis, you can create a separate compliance risk register. Larger organizations are those in highly regulated industries typically have a compliance department or a compliance officer, right? As I mentioned earlier, well, it is an example of a distributed responsibility, right? Well, there could be one department like PMO could be looking after that, or in addition to that, you could even have different departments dealing with different types of compliances. But if you have a PMO can coordinate amongst all those various departments and offices. These are the 5 best practices about compliances. You can just note it down. This is good to know. First of all, you must do documentation. Update compliance needs and risks throughout the life of the project. Risks are going to change. The compliance needs can also change during the life of the project. Maybe there is a new regulation that must be documented, that must be introduced into the project, agreed by everyone, and that should be made part of the compliance requirements. Risk planning, naturally, we are talking about the compliance related risk, that is the risk of non-compliance. So you have to keep doing the risk planning, risk identification, risk response planning, and everything throughout the life of the project. Compliance council, that includes quality and audit specialist and relevant legal and technical specialists, whatever kinds of compliances are there. Maybe you have certain compliance related stakeholders put together into a team, and we call them a compliance council. Maybe we have a PMO which organizes that, and if there is no PMO and still compliance is very important, we could establish our compliance council at the project level or at the organizational level, whichever is best for you. Then these councils or whatever the experts are who are actually going to do the audits regarding compliance, this could be made as a formal process. Compliance stewardship. You must realize as a project manager, it is always your responsibility. You will be the steward of all the compliances, right? So naturally, you have to take on this responsibility. Although it may look like it is an additional responsibility, it is more than what the project work demands for, but naturally, this is built into the whole system. So your project has to comply with all those requirements, and you have to take on the responsibility of compliance stewardship. Okay, we have some questions here. Which of the following are effective guidelines for measuring project compliance? One answer is correct. The options we have are tracking work completed in a Gantt chart. B, using quality assurance outputs to confirm deliverables and process compliance and identify the needs for corrective action. C, prioritizing effort using a Moscow analysis. D, reporting progress by conducting a sprint review and demonstration. What is the best answer?
B.
B. Okay, Kelvin, what do you say?
B2, because it's a quality assurance process.
Exactly. This is the only correct answer because that is relevant to the compliance. Others are normal processes. Something is to do with the scheduling, something is to do with prioritization, but that is not about the compliance. Okay, we have already talked about compliance, so I will skip this slide, and this brings us to the end of this complete lesson number 1, which was about the business acumen, right? So we are done with it. If you have any questions regarding the whole thing, the lesson we started from business acumen till today, till we are finishing it off, you can ask any questions if you have any.
It's been really interesting. You're saying this is setting the baseline for what's coming, eh?
Yeah. Is this a question?
No, I'm just reflecting.
Okay. Yeah, of course, you're right. Okay, if we do not have any more questions on that, let's call it a day for the lesson number 1, and we will start lesson 2 after a little break. So how much is okay with you? 5 minutes or 10 minutes?
Yeah, I can get 10 minutes or I can get something to a snack.
Okay,
Start.
10 minutes is good enough. We'll be meeting
I get some cookies.
after
Yeah.
10 minutes. Yep. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.